There is no end to matter, there is no end to grace. There is no end to spirit, there is no end to space. And so we walk with hope in hand towards Zion's promised land. Through every trial, through every test, we seek his peace, we find his rest. There is no end to Zion, no end to love's pure call. For those who seek his promise will find it all in all in all. There is no end to Zion, no end to love's pure call. For those who seek his promise we'll find her all in all in all.
Welcome into a very special Key of David podcast. It is Labor Day 2024, and I am joined with my partner in crime, David, the Leo, the Lion Douglas, and Latter-day Chad. And we just debuted and premiered Latter-day Chad's kickoff episode with us here at Zion Media this past Saturday. A lot of you guys tuned into it. The comment section is on fire, and Chad's in there answering comments, which I love. I love it when one of our guests gets in there and starts firing back and responding. And, you know, boys bring in truth and fire, and we love it. Chad, welcome back to Zion Media, my man.
So what we're doing today, it's a funny story. So this is some stuff I've been researching for a while. And here's the story. They can back me up on it. This is what happened. But the last time, before we recorded, and as many of you know, most people on here, they don't know my real name. If anything, they might know like my first name or something, right? But Shane basically just calls me by my full name. And he's like, that's you, right? We were trying to figure out who that was all day, because before I was going to bed last night, the Holy Ghost told me that he needs to talk about the temple. He needs to share what he did to prepare for the endowment. And I've done a lot of research on the endowment. I think it's one of the most important things about the restoration. I think the entire Book of Mormon is about the temple endowment in a way, and it's definitely not stolen from Freemasons, 100%, right? If it was some stupid Freemason thing, you think I'd believe it? No, it's real, right? And we're going to go over a lot of the symbolism, because actually studying these apocryphal works, because it's all over the Apocrypha, it's all over the Gnostic Gospels. And it really first stood out to me reading Margaret Barker, who we first talked about the other day. I got into her work because I found out about how Jehovah was once known as the Son of God in the pre-exile Israelite religion. And I don't have this book on me right now. I have another one of her books that goes over this same sort of temple rituals that the ancient Israelites would do. But there was a passage of hers that really stood out to me. It was from a passage in Enoch, which we're going to go in depth about, where Enoch is essentially his earthly clothing is taken and he's given what's called garments of glory, and he's anointed in oil, and he's transformed into a son of God. It says he's transformed into one of the glorious ones, one of the holy ones, right? And, you know, if you've read Enoch, he then receives a new name with his angelic status, becomes the angel Metatron, the little Yahweh. So to me, she's like saying this represents ancient Israelite rituals they would do in the temple, which was about atonement, and putting on the garments of glory represented being covered by the atonement and becoming a divine son of God. And like, that sounds really familiar to you guys, doesn't it? From a non-Mormon biblical scholar saying that the ancient Israelites would do this, right? I mean, what do you guys thought?
So let's take a step back here really quick. Zoom back to the 30,000 foot view. So today, in today's pod, we're going to jump into the endowment of power, right? And we're going to go through a journey of yourself, Latter-day Chad. And a lot of people don't know this about you, but you just recently had your endowments taken out, right? Like this summer, wasn't it?
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of time to go since most of the times I'm working in the morning doing sales. Everything is getting ready for the meeting in the morning, and then I'm working until about 9 at night, right? So I'm only really able to go on like Wednesdays when they have super early sessions. But I did do a lot of prep for it.
Walk us through that. Like, kind of walk us through like where you are in your life, how old you are, give people a little insight. Everybody seemed to care more about your sunglasses than anything in the questions. Like, it was the number one most reoccurring thing. So let's hit on that just a little bit. Like, who is Latter-day Chad? You've chosen to remain anonymous. The sunglasses, aren't just a cool swag thing. It's something that you're doing to try to remain a little bit anonymous. But I got a deep feeling that one day you're going to pop these bad boys off. So walk us through that. Like, who are you and your journey and getting to the point where you're like, yeah, I think I'm ready to take out the endowments, and what you started to study. Because as we've chatted, both on the phone, WhatsApp, and text, you started to pretty much peel back this veil of secrecy, sacredcy, whatever you want to call it, and you started putting these cookie crumbs together, and it became this incredible experience for you. And so I want to jump into that, and your experience getting to the temple, and then let's jump into this endowment of power.
Yeah, well, for one thing, I think not only if you look at the membership of the church, most people don't understand a thing about the temple. And that's why I've heard multiple times, so many people freak out about the endowment. Because they don't understand that the ancient Christians were doing these sort of esoteric rituals. There's some quotes I have saved about early church fathers making references to this stuff, including a theosis ritual that they called the white stone, where they would receive a new name. So that might sound familiar if you know what the white stone in Revelations is, that Joseph Smith said about it. It's the endowment. But for me, my background is basically, my parents are both converts to the church, and I was baptized when I was a kid, but I never really believed that stuff. I've gone in depth about this on some other podcasts. But eventually I received revelation that led me to the church, and I didn't want to believe it because I think it's very cheesy. I don't like this sort of culture, and I do think that by taking this stuff more seriously, it will really help the culture, because the Book of Mormon is all about this sort of endowment of power, theosis type stuff, right? Lehi's vision of the Tree of Life, it's in 3 sections. Entering into the Tree of Life, according to Margaret Barker's research, who's a non-Mormon scholar, represents entering into the presence of God. So there's some layers to that symbolism. Not only is the Tree of Life God's wife, but it's God's family. So the image of the Tree of Life is a mother bearing a child, which you will recognize in 1 Nephi 11, and you will recognize in First Temple Judaism. The Tree of Life is a mother bearing a child who is our salvation. So for me,
remind everyone who's on this of that scripture. I feel like you had it memorized, where the angel asked Nephi when he sees the tree, like, what is it that you understand of this, right?
Yeah. So Nephi, first the angel asks him, do you believe that your father saw what he claims he saw, which in the Deuteronomist reforms, the Tree of Life, it's the original menorah in the temple. And we could go in depth another time about how the Hebrew letter Shin, which is for Shaddai or the mother, was found next to the menorah mound in Ohio. That's a whole nother discussion. But the point is, the Tree of Life, the original menorah in the temple, was a symbol of God's family and his wife. And it was removed from the temple during that time period. So the angel asks Nephi, do you believe your father saw that? After he seeks further light because he knows the mysteries of God, and he's given that vision. So he says yes. And as soon as he says, yes, I believe in that tree, the angel's like, blessed are you for believing in the Most High God, and blessed are you for believing in the Son of the Most High God. So somehow believing in that tree, which the ancient image of the Tree of Life is a mother bearing a son, means that he believes in the Son of God, right? So we go into that. And then later on, the angel shows him the tree, and it's white, and it's beautiful, and it's most precious above all the other things. And then Nephi asks the meaning of it, and he is shown a virgin who is white and beautiful and precious above all other things, just like the tree was described as. And then the angel says, that is the mother of God, or the Son of God, depending on the translation, because it's the mother of Jehovah after the manner of the flesh. Now, why does it specify the manner of the flesh? Because that entire vision is a parallel. There's so many parallels between the spiritual world and the physical world in that. And the tree with the same description that is bearing a fruit, that we eat it, like we eat the flesh of Christ with the sacrament. And in Alma 5, the fruit of the tree of life is directly correlated with the sacrament bread. It is directly correlated, right? So eating the sacrament is eating the fruit of the tree of life. So by doing that salvation, you are saved by eating of the fruit. So that comparison is clearly drawn after the manner of the flesh. That means that the tree is the spiritual mother of the Lord. If the virgin is the mother after the flesh, the tree is the spiritual mother of the Lord. And we're going to do a whole episode on Shaddai, the mother, and how Heavenly Mother they did try and remove her from the Old Testament, and there are remnants that are there. But that's not the topic of now. Studying this stuff.
For those of you who haven't seen the first episode that we did with Latter-day Chad, go back and watch it, because we jump into some shocking historical details. For me, going on a mission, and I'm sure any of you guys who went on a mission, we jumped into the teaching of the great apostasy, right? And Talmage wrote this incredible book that everyone on their mission could read about the great apostasy. And you learn about the Council of Nicaea. You learn about Rome and Constantine taking over. And at the time, there was this merging of many cultures, right? You had Rome, which was the capital of the world at that point. They were like America at this point, and they were a vassal state. They had tons of countries and tons of religions that were wrapped up into Rome. And the challenge that they had is they were taking these gospels, they were taking these Gnostic texts and these teachings of Jesus, and these different religions. Well, let's take Hellenism for Greece. They started to see their teachings in Hellenism and started tying them into the theosis, started tying them into their understanding of this. And where I come full circle on this is I've always been under the understanding that the changes that were in the Bible, and we know that there's changes in the Bible, the articles of faith talk about that we believe the Bible is the word of God as long as it is translated correctly. And my understanding had been that the things that were changed, the Catholic Church did. Right. I served in Peru, and, it's 90% Catholic down there. And I was able to sit down with people and show them, like, look, this was tweaked and this was changed. And it was all kind of done in confirmation with Catholicism, wrapping all of these things inside of it. And so that's been my understanding. I never once, not a single time in my entire life, considered the Jews may have changed their scriptures as well.
Yeah. I mean, the earliest church fathers mention it, that St. Jerome or Origen, they all talk about how the Jews altered the Old Testament to remove doctrine of Christ. And now with the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Samaritan Old Testament and other stuff, we see that was in fact true, that the Son of God, in some of the manuscripts we have, and we don't have all of them, do show that he was taught about. But that's the topic for the other video. If you want to see that, and we're going to go more in depth, we have 2 videos about how the Son of God was in the Old Testament planned, and then another one about how God's wife was in the Old Testament. But for now, the endowment of power. So researching this stuff, these teachings that non-Mormon scholars are talking about, these things that line up so much with us. And there's this podcast called the Ancient Tradition Podcast that its whole basis is there was this ancient religion that all other religions came from. And they're like putting together, piecing these things like, oh yeah, there was an atonement in this religion, and garments of glory were important in this religion, and there were prayer circles, and there was all this crazy stuff, right? So
do people in the comment section of that video, do Mormons pipe up and be like, bro, check out the Mormons? Like,
oh yeah, all the time. Same thing if you look at the conspiracies about the Hopewell Mound builders, like why were there ancient Hebrew artifacts? Half the comments are from Mormons. So we go to that. So I'm reading Margaret Barker. I have one of her books right here. It goes into some of this stuff. It quotes Apocrypha about these rituals. So throughout these apocryphal texts.
Hey, is Margaret, I've been wanting to ask it, is Margaret Barker Catholic,
She's a Methodist.
She's a Methodist. Okay.
Right. So going through that, there's a clear pattern. So one thing Margaret Barker doesn't really touch on as much, but she mentions that the liturgy of Solomon's temple had something to do with the fall from grace and Adam and Eve and returning to Eden, right? And that by entering into the Holy of Holies, we're returning to that place where we're at one with God. Now, there's an apocryphal text that's gained quite a lot of attention. It wasn't in English until after Joseph Smith's time. I want to emphasize it, but it is exactly like our endowment ceremony. It is called either the Life of Adam and Eve or the Apocalypse of Moses. Depending, a lot of these texts, they're the apocalypse of this, the apocalypse of that talk about the garments of glory. So in this text, Satan has a big gripe, a personal gripe with Adam, right? So he causes Adam to fall from grace. And when Adam falls, before he falls, he had this sort of garment of light around him, right? Then when he falls, he's naked again. We all know the story. What's interesting is it does emphasize garments a lot. So when Satan is cast out after he makes Adam fall, God takes away his garments of glory, which is going to be a very common theme. The garments of glory represents angelic or divine status, right? Or to Margaret Barker, it represents the glorified, resurrected body. That's what she says in her Temple Theology and Introduction book, that when Enoch is clothed in the garments of glory, he is obtaining a resurrected body. And if you go to the Hebrew root word of atonement, so atonement is kafar, I believe it's pronounced. So kafar means to cover with a cloth. That is the root word of atonement, right? So when you get into the garments, it is just like that symbolism. And just like in our symbolism, after Adam and Eve are cast out, Jehovah comes, he kills an animal, and he gives them a garment of skins to be able to bear the divine presence. So he gives them this covering, right? This covering over them, this kafar, this garment of skins, where before they had a garment of light, they were divine beings. So the garments of glory represents divine status. Hugh Nibley, and we're going to go more into this, Hugh Nibley, he was a genius. He talks about how the inner garments that we wear, which is a remnant of our full temple robe, it represents that even in our fallen state, we have divine spirits. Like Jesus said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. So throughout the book of Enoch, right, we have that scene where Enoch, he ascends through multiple levels of heaven. Now that's a very pattern, right? So we have Adam and Eve, they fall, and then they sort of get these garments. And then throughout that whole liturgy of the life of Adam and Eve, both the devil and angels come to sort of test them, right? So like he tries praying to God and Satan comes instead, and all this interesting stuff happens throughout the life of Adam and Eve. And he's clothed by the garments, and the angels sort of teach them and guide them along the way in the Apocalypse of Moses, right? And when he's given the garments by the angel, God says to the angel, clothe Adam as he was before the fall, right? So in Enoch, he's ascending through the heaven. And again, biblical scholars, they're saying that this represents some sort of ritual that was done by the Israelites. And we have the remnants of this in Leviticus and Numbers when it's talking about the tabernacle and the Day of Atonement, how Aaron and his brethren would be dressed in these garments for their atonement ceremonies. And now we're seeing this reflected in these sort of liturgical apocryphal texts, which they're called pseudographica because they're not written by the author. It claims like Apocalypse of Moses wasn't written by Moses. Apocalypse of Abraham wasn't written by Abraham. So in Enoch, that's the biggest one. Enoch ascends through the levels of the heavens. Earlier, it's a very interesting scene where we know the word for mysteries. When Paul is talking about mysteries, it's talking about esoteric temple rites. That's what the word for mystery back then is. And as Enoch is ascending through the heavens, Michael comes to him and he grasps Enoch by his hand. And it says that as Michael is grasping Enoch by the hand, he reveals the secrets or the mysteries of godliness to him, right? right?
The fact
There's more of this.
The fact that they say grasp instead of take, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it says grasp. And not only that, it says lift him up, which is atonement imagery. So he is grasping him and raising him up. Later, Michael appears again. And this time, Michael comes with the garments of glory. The Lord says, dress him in my garments of glory. And Enoch is presented on a throne, and he's anointed with oil, right? This is 2 Enoch 22. And he's transformed into a divine being. He sees himself on the throne, transformed, and he makes a note of how there's no difference between him and any of the heavenly beings, and his face shines like an angel, and he's transformed. And Enoch receives the new name Metatron. He becomes an angel. Now, I don't think the book of Enoch was written by Enoch, but I do think there are certain historical things that happen. Like, Enoch's a weird thing where it's a combination of temple liturgy from the people like the Essenes, and this goes back to the Deuteronomists. The Essenes were like the true heirs of the first temple. The Deuteronomists, they alter everything, they secularize everything. The Essenes, their doctrine sounds very Mormon at times, they talk about the Melchizedek priesthood, which is mostly gone from the Old Testament. They talk about the garments of glory, for example. They talk about the sons of God, or the war between the sons of God. That's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, and they also write about how the Jews of their time were in apostasy. So these people that held this Enochian literature seriously, they are a different group of people. I do think they're prophetic, and I do think pieces of the book of Enoch are taken from an original book of Enoch. But I also think Enoch in this liturgy, much like in Ascension of Isaiah, much like in Apocalypse of Moses, he represents us. So as Enoch, because we know Enoch is actually one of the 7 archangels. He's one of the 7 dispensation heads. So why would he get a new name as an angel? Why would he become Metatron? Well, Metatron's us. Metatron represents us. And that's sort of how I'm viewing it as I'm preparing for the temple. Is like it. So the same thing happens in Ascension of Isaiah, right? The devil has his garments of glory taken, and then they are given to Isaiah as he ascends through multiple levels of heaven and reaches it. And then Isaiah makes note of how he was dressed and he looks like all of the heavenly beings there after he obtains those garments of glory. So as I'm preparing for the temple, researching this, knowing that this represents ancient Israelite temple rites, and another thing Margaret Barker goes in depth on is that the imagery in the temple was meant to trigger visionary experiences and meant to receive revelation, right? And they put a lot of emphasis on, if you look at General Conference, the temple is where the Lord manifests himself. Just before Nelson gave that talk, I think it was Elder Anderson, he talks about, he literally quoted, "They will see my face and know that I am," right? Which is the pinnacle of repentance and faith, is Jesus Christ unveiling himself to you. And that's how the prophets saw themselves in the temple. So if you look at Isaiah, when he goes into the temple, he receives this vision and he sees the Lord Jehovah sitting upon his throne, right? After he enters into the Holy of Holies, which is the presence of God. So as I'm preparing for the temple, and someone I know actually instructed me on this before I even read this Margaret Barker stuff, I'm like, okay, I need to literally imagine that I'm entering into the presence of God. That's why in the Holy of Holies, they would have the Ark of the Covenant. Well, what's the Ark of the Covenant? It is the table where sacrifices were made. And if you look at the Gospel of John, which recreates the Day of Atonement ritual, when the tomb is opened by Mary Magdalene, she sees an angel sitting on each end of it. Now, we're going to have an image edited of this, of the Day of Atonement recreation in John next to the Ark of the Covenant, but it's almost identical. The Ark of the Covenant has an angel on each side, and that is where the goat that represented Jehovah, his blood would be on the Ark of the Covenant, right? And then again, Gospel of John, an angel on each side of the table, Jesus' blood in the middle, but he's gone. So these things...
Let me mention something on that I found that was pretty cool. In 2 of the 3 Gospels, it describes those angels on both ends of the table where Jesus was laid out. And when it says that they came in, they said that they were on each end and their arms were extended. And if you look at the iconography of the of the not the Holy of Holies,
The Ark of the Covenant.
Ark of the Covenant, what does it have? It has two seraphim, two angels with their wings. They're both on each side, and their wings are straight out like this, facing each other.
Exactly. And we're going to edit images of that into it. So right up there, you see it. That's the Ark of the Covenant and the Day of Atonement table from when Jesus Christ rose. And that is very much on purpose. Just like how when so on the Day of Atonement, that's the only time they would say the name Yahweh. So when Jesus is in the garden, they take him, they ask him if he's the Christ. And then he says, I am. And they step backwards. And he's like, I said that I am. And they all fall to the ground. And on the Day of Atonement, when the name Jehovah was said, they would all fall to the ground, just like that. Right? So it's clearly being written for an audience that recognizes that this is the Day of Atonement, right? A goat named Jehovah is slain. And that's why it says no substitute was used that day. Going into the theosis rituals, right? So we have not just the apocryphal, there's multiple apocryphal Adams and Eves that I didn't mention. There's even one where before they fall, they're told basically that, hey, why don't you partake of the fruit? When God partook of the fruit, he was a man just like you. And that is how he became God.
Where does it say that?
That is in one of these apocryphal. I'll send the link. I believe it's the Armenian Adam and Eve. And this is later sort of confirmed by God, who says, they've come as one of us.
Straighten your face so you're in the middle of this. Shane doesn't like this view, and David and I like it, and we never get to use it. But Shane's out of commission today, so we're gonna. All right, love it. I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Shane, look at this, Shane.
So when I was preparing for the temple, I basically went through a process of heavily meditating beforehand. I fasted for 3 days straight before I went into the temple. And internally, I tried to overcome my sins, because entering into the temple, as there's a lot of evidence for this, that when they would enter into the temple, Margaret Barker even talks about this, they saw themselves as being transformed into angelic beings, right? So in the language of the temple, a priest in the temple in white clothing is an angel, right? Or a son of God, depending on how you view it, is a divine being.
So does that mean that when David, on Fridays, when he's doing his temple working, that he should consider himself an angel? Because that's what they were back in the olden days.
Absolutely. Like, the angel priests are one of the things that were destroyed by the Deuteronomists. Now, this is a historical slander when they're killing these people. So this doesn't happen in Chronicles. It happens in Kings, because they're written by different people who hated each other. But not in Chronicles, in Kings, there's a line about killing the sacred prostitutes in English, which there's no reason to think there were prostitutes in the temple. Most scholars say that was historical slander. The word is holy ones. They killed the holy ones in the temples. Now, if you remember last time when we're talking about Jesus being called the Holy One of Israel, Jehovah being called the Holy One of Israel, the holy ones are the divine sons of God. Their species is not angels. Angel means messenger. It is malak, right? So even like biblical scholars, like Michael Heisner, he talks about when you see angel, it is either a human messenger or a godly messenger. So these are gods, right? These are the holy ones, right? So when you enter into the temple, you should be seeing that process. You are being transformed into a divine being and returning to the presence of God. Now, this goes into the sort of more Gnostic teachings. So where did the Gnostics even come from? We can go more in depth on this when we do the video about like the compass and the square and how it's not stolen from Freemasonry. But if you read the book of Acts, it's written by Luke. There is a line where Luke talks about how he recorded everything until Jesus Christ's resurrection, and then he recorded everything after his resurrection until he ascended. Now, do you guys remember reading about Jesus' teachings after he resurrected, before he ascended to the heavens?
They're pretty missing, right?
Yeah, it's missing.
Yeah, kind of sparse.
And there's various statements from early church fathers, even from popes, talking about this secret gospel of Mark. And in a lot of the statements by one of the popes seems to validate the secret gospel of Mark, but also seems to say, no, this isn't something that should be public because people will misunderstand it. What they would misunderstand is Jesus Christ disrobing himself and putting on new clothing in the bridal chamber, as it's called. And you see the same pattern in the Gnostic Gospels. So throughout the Nag Hammadi library, there's a lot of stuff. There's this one book. It's really important. I forget who quotes it. I'm gonna put the reference to David to edit it. This is the saint who quoted this text. So it was somewhat canonical for a long time. It's called Teachings of Silvanus, or Teachings of Silas, who was an associate of Paul. Now, this is going more into the Gnostic stuff. This one's kind of Gnostic. It was found with the Gnostic texts. But because we have saints quoting it early on, it was somewhat considered orthodox. And the fact that it was hidden away in the Nag Hammadi library, the reason why they're hiding these things away is because they're being persecuted and killed for it.
And destroying the records.
Yeah, so it shows that even in sort of more orthodox stuff that were once considered orthodox, even around like 400 AD, people were now being persecuted for. Teachings of Silvanus is straight up an endowment text, right? It says things such as, return to God your Father and wisdom your mother, and putting on the garments of glory again, but it describes how you need to awaken to your divine nature, remember who you are, and return through Jesus Christ to enter into the presence of the tree of life, to your father and your mother. And very many times it talks about taking off the garments of sin. It describes the garments of fornication, the garments of the world. Take them off and receive the garments of glory from your parents. Wisdom is calling you, saying, oh, you foolish ones, here is a gift which you are receiving. Now, notice that word, a gift that you are receiving.
And I noticed wisdom, right? And until we did our podcast with you that aired last week, I never had the connection with wisdom and Heavenly Mother. And now every single time I'm going to see wisdom, it's going to jump off the page for me and be like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Like literally, I just looked up wisdom in the gospel library, I don't even remember what scripture it was in the Old Testament. It's literally a temple wedding. And that's what it seems like. You hear that they're talking about partaking of bread and wine and being dressed in white garments. And there's a comparison that wisdom is greater than strength, and wisdom is correlated to the man's wife. And it's like a man without wisdom will surely fail or something like that. But a man without strength, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it's clearly talking about the wife. This is like a temple wedding. And it's crazy that it's in the Old Testament, if you actually look at it, that wisdom is always associated with the garments of glory and putting them on. So we go back to the Gnostic Gospels. So there's a lot of weird stuff in the Gnostic Gospels, which I believe it comes from a common source. So where the Gnostic Gospels seem to come from. So we have that secret Gospel of Mark and these hidden teachings that Jesus Christ made before he ascended. And there was this place where it was all sort of together, and there was a big fire. Forget its name. The Gnostics, supposedly, they claimed that they were the people, that they went in there, and they wrote down all this stuff, all these secret teachings. Now, some of the stuff, it seems to get kind of hectic, like where the creator of the world is evil. That's not in all the Gnostic Gospels, and not all Gnostic sects believe that. Gnostic is a very broad term that was basically used to slander any first century heretics who believed in hidden teachings of Jesus, right? So if you go into the Gospel of Philip, for example, there is, again, this imagery of Jesus as he's leading them through this sort of temple. He is putting on new clothing as he approaches the gate. And there are these different gateways they have to pass through in the temple. And they have to learn hidden names and secret signs and tokens to pass through these gateways in the temple.
Says that?
Yeah, it's in the Gospel of Philip, right? To enter into the bridal chamber. So they call the Holy of Holies in these Gnostic Gospels the bridal chamber, right? And as they're going through it, it's not just Jesus and his disciples. It's also like Mary Magdalene and all the women are going through with them, right? There's this one gospel. It was like an apocryphal Gnostic Gospel of John. that at the councils was very controversial. They hated it. It doesn't say anything about an evil demiurge. It just has Jesus teaching some hidden teachings. And what they didn't like was that Jesus is, quote unquote, dancing in it. It's weird. Like, Jesus is dancing. He wasn't break dancing. He wasn't doing. But if you look at the actual language for dancing in the Greek, it seems to be a language that can be applied to some sort of ritual, some sort of ritualistic thing. And the dancing was done in some sort of a circle, right? And this is one of the things that the Gnostics claim they had. And we have paintings and some artwork that I sent them. I stole this part from Ward Radio and sort of thought it would fit in with my Gnostic stuff. So if you want to watch their thing, look up Ward Radio Gnostics. But put these images on screen. These are
let's do it.
This is the dance Jesus was doing in these Gnostic Gospels.
This is wild. And while we're pulling this up, the first thing I think of dancing nowadays and dance circle is I flash to the Australian break dancer from the Olympics that we just had in Paris.
Yeah, I mean, why would
you guys remember that?
It's not. Yeah, I mean, it's not dancing that Jesus was doing in the temple. We'll show you what he was doing.
This is crazy. These images are.
So this is one depiction of the dance it was that Jesus is teaching. So after they go through they tell the passcodes to get through and they're entering into the bridal chamber. You see this depiction of all these men and women together in some sort of a circle praying, right? And it's very interesting. So that's what they say is a depiction of the quote-unquote dance that Jesus taught before his ascension. Now, let's look at this other depiction. There's a bowl that is depicting this as well.
This bowl's wild. So where did these come from? These aren't...
I stole this from Ward Radio last minute when they were talking about this stuff.
Well, they're your boys. They like you. They're your boys. So shout out Ward Radio.
Yeah, I'll get a reference to it that says what it is, and we'll edit it on the screen. So this is another depiction of this dance that they're learning. Now, what you'll notice is that there is an equal number of men and women in it, and that they're doing these strange things with their hands. What? And in both depictions, they were around some feathered serpent, which is a symbol for Jesus Christ. The winged serpent on the stick, that is a symbol for Jesus Christ, that Moses rose up. That's why in Genesis, when Satan falls, the serpent, it says that he will slither on his belly. Well, that's what snakes do. No, because he was a flying winged snake, which is a symbol of a divine being.
And then in falling, he lost all of his glory and was stripped of his raiments.
His garments of glory. Exactly. Right. So, right, that's why in the original Genesis, he loses his wings. In the apocryphal Adam and Eve, he loses his garments of glory. He's losing his divine status. If you believe in like multiple mortal probations type stuff, maybe he's losing his body, right? I have certain theological issues with the multiple probations thing, but I'm open to the idea. I mean, Brigham Young seemed to explicitly teach it. So I'm pretty agnostic on that. But
your boy Hugh Nibley wrote his very last work, and his family published it after he was dead, posthumously published it, called One Eternal Round. And I mean, Nibley was into it deep.
Oh yeah, Hugh Nibley, he's amazing. So in the Gnostic Gospel, so Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Thomas, it is this common reoccurring thing of hidden knowledge being revealed through these sort of temple rituals. And they weren't allowed to say what happened in the temple rituals. They would learn secret names and passcodes and things. And certain scholars have actually suggested that the handshakes in Freemasonry originate from the Gnostics, and that the Knights Templar, there's a lot of evidence that the Knights Templar continued these esoteric sort of rituals, right? I mean, I'm sure you've heard about that, right? Knights Templar doing weird rituals. So it's like it goes from the Gnostics and gets sort of preserved and stuff. And then we get down to basically the Freemasons and these sort of esoteric brotherhoods inheriting some of these ideas, right? And Joseph Smith himself, he said that the Freemasons held a corrupted version of the priesthood.
Corrupted, right? So Solomon's temple and the priesthood, yeah.
Exactly, right? We also have, so the gateway, the Holy of Holies, if you look at Isaiah, which it's written for our time, by the way, Isaiah, when it's talking about the saints and Israel going to battle with Babylon, do you know what Isaiah says? He talks about exalting the banner upon the mountain, which in Isaiah, that is code word for the gathering of Israel, right? We associate that with the Book of Mormon as well, the stick of Joseph and stick of Judah. And then he says, shake the hand that you may enter into the gate of the nobles. The gate of the nobles, that's the holy of holies of the temple. So when they're preparing to go to Babylon, he's telling them to shake the hand to enter into the gate of the holy of holies. Which, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Especially with Michael, when he reveals the mysteries to Enoch by grasping him by the hand. In fact, there's a quote. If you can scroll down to my Gnostic... Actually, I'm going to look it up real quick. My face is going to disappear, but I have the link right here.
Okay. As you pull this up, I'm gonna give a little detail on these ancient rituals. So I can't remember if I've talked to you about this, Chad, but I when I was on my mission president was 33-degree Mason, Peruvian guy. And I served in the office for 6 months as assistant, and I was with him nonstop. It was a non-proselyting mission. We had to accompany our mission president everywhere because there had been an assassination of some missionaries in Peru. So they had this new protocol where the APs were nonstop with the mission president. And this just, gave me an incredible opportunity to nonstop be around my mission president. And I soaked it up. I took every opportunity I could to ask him everything that I was studying and deep questions. And he really impressed upon me the need, I'd say need for like, Trevor, you need to become a Mason. When you get back, you should look into it. You should figure it out because you're going to learn some things about their ceremony. You're going to learn some things about the past that will help you reconcile what is inside our theology. That'll help you understand what is inside our endowment. And so I got back from my mission and I just started jumping in because, you're limited, at least missionaries in my time, we couldn't use the internet. You were limited to books. And I got back and I just got to open up everything. And you mentioned something, Chad, in the beginning of this, that this ritual was something that, these people that are writing about these temple ceremonies, these endowments, that they have this link to some old ancient religion, old ancient theology. That's what I kept finding when I was studying. I'd go in and I'd start studying this religion and the next religion, and I started noticing these common things, these common strands. And to me, it was very, very clear that they're all grabbing off of some ancient truth and they're weaving that into their theology, their understanding. And the only thing that I could wrap my head around was Adam being the first father, having all the information that they had before the fall, after the fall, God giving Adam this endowment of power, taught Adam how to commune with God, taught Adam these mysteries, and they're now called the Eleusian mysteries. And I just butchered the pronunciation of this, but what I found, and wrapping this all whole, is that the ceremony that the Masons had, some of these handshakes and these similarities, these things were done all the way back. I mean, we're talking all the way back in history. Babylon mystery schools, the Hellenistic schools. People came from across the world, from all over the world, to Greece, to Helen, during Plato's times, during Socrates' times, so that they could be endowed and go through these mystery schools. And in all of them, in all of the teachings, they talk about the fall. And in all of these teachings, it's ceremonial. And you mentioned these, how we're presented with these different symbols and the tokens and the names and the rituals. And when people go and get their endowment for the first time and they go to the temple, if they're not familiar with these things, they can seem very occultish. They can seem like scary, right? I know, I've had sisters that have gone through it being like, that was creepy. And I was like, well, that was a ritual. What you just experienced was a ritual. And this ritual was passed down for generations and generations all the way back to Adam. And you can imagine how important it would be for Adam in his time being like, how do I get this? How do I convey this knowledge onto my kids so that when they teach it to their kids and then they teach it to their kids and I'm not here, that this is going to be passed on? It was done through these rituals. It was done through these experiences. And so, I just felt like I wanted to share that because it ties so much into all these things you're saying. So were you able to find?
Yeah, I found the quote. So
your camera's still off,
I have
Brad.
an essay that I wrote on this, and I'll have them upload it to like the Zion's Media website or something, so you guys can all read it. Put it in the description. I have an essay where I went in depth about this stuff. But so first off, when describing, so we know in the Gnostic text there were some sort of passcodes and signs that they would have to give to go through into the bridal chamber. Clement of Alexandria in Stamatra, Book 5, chapter, that got cut off, I don't know what chapter it was. He describes how they would sort of do this. He says, they say that knowledge of truth can be recognized by these tokens and by the images impressed by them on the initiated. Just as the mysteries of the idols, they are initiated by certain signs, of them being called signs, and some of them enigmas and other handlings. So this early church father, he's describing the secret gnosis that the Gnostics claim they got from the, lost gospel of Mark and all this stuff that Jesus Christ taught before his ascension. And they're trying to copy this stuff down and recreate it. And it always focuses on pre-existent spirits, that we are divine and we entered into this world and we need to awaken and remember our divine nature. And then he straight up says there were signs and tokens. Another guy, so I think his name is Epiphanius of Salamis. I don't have the exact quote, but I can paraphrase. He talks about how these Gnostic sects, they would know who was initiated by the grip of their handshake or the tickling of their palm, he says. And that's how they know who was initiated into the Gnostic temples. So I don't think the Gnostics were straight up a continuation of Jesus Christ's priesthood, but we do have that sort of story of them writing down what they can and learning what they can before these records were destroyed, right? So there's that. And then we get into because the Gnostics, like, there were so many groups of them, and they don't all believe the same things. And we have very little that we know. Very, very little, because most of their teachings and records were literally burned. They were burned at the stake as heretics and killed. And even people like Origen, who were fundamental for, organizing Christianity, or I forget his name, but the guy who baptized Tertullian, the first guy to use the term Trinity, they were later called Gnostic heretics. And a lot of the things that were claimed about them are verifiably false, like that they denied the resurrection of Christ. And there were certainly Gnostic sects that did that. Yeah, but Gnostic isn't one religion. The Gospel of Philip doesn't mention any of these weirder Gnostic ideas that some of these other sects believed in. It mentions that we're pre-existent spirits, talks about Jesus putting on the garments of glory and going through into the bridal chamber. So we go through that. And then we get to the Chief Mitiga stuff with the Ojibwe, which I've been able to confirm from a lot of people. So Chief Mitiga, he shows up. He starts talking about how the Ojibwe, we have the endowment, right? Some people are skeptical. Some people are calling him a scammer or whatever. But it's true. They do have the same signs and tokens. There's a depiction that I'm not sure if we'd be allowed to share on here without breaking covenants from 1600s, where the settlers, you've seen that, right, David? You're the one who showed that to me. The settlers are greeting the Ojibwe, and they give a very specific sign with their arms to greet them, to show them that they are friends, to identify them.
Well, just for sake of not being religious, everybody's seen the Indian how greeting. How, right?
Yes.
How.
Yeah, there's more to it than that. There's another thing that they do with that.
All right.
With the right hand, and there's something else that they're doing in that picture.
Somebody
It is
send me this.
also-
Somebody send me this picture right now.
It is also depicted on that
I'll
little
get it to you.
bowl, that little bowl from the Gnostics, where it shows the men and the women in that little circle doing things. It's very similar to that. We also see depictions of Yahweh, statues of Yahweh from like 1000 BC or something, doing the exact same thing with his arms. But it's very interesting. So upon researching it, it's not just the Ojibwe. The Navajo very clearly have a ritual. That we have a video of a Navajo elder talking about some of this stuff, right? So could you pull up that video?
Yeah, and as he's pulling it up, I'm flashing back to the video you're talking about Mitiga, right? And he's talking about how when he was in San Diego at for the military, how he was taken to the San Diego temple, and how he went through the temple, and how there was just all of these light bulbs popping off in his head, being like, "Oh, we do that too. Oh, we do that too. Oh, we do that too." Just thing after thing after thing. So again, these rituals and these ceremonies were the hidden truth, the Gnosis, right?
The Gnosis, the endowment. All the Gnostics claim to have that hidden knowledge, but the endowment is the restoration of the true Gnosis, and I don't think it's fully restored yet. I think there's more. There's definitely more to the endowment, but because a lot of people have rejected it, we're not going to get more. But here, start from the beginning. So I want that little intro part. So this is from Navajo, American Navajo teachings or traditional teachings. Go to the first 10 seconds. So, and then pause it after the intro, right?
I will say there's a little bit of music at the beginning of this, so it might be a little hard to hear, but
Yeah, we don't have to listen to the music. Just what he says at the beginning. This is important.
Oh, can't hear it. I'm sitting on the seat of my pants. Oh, dude, you're on mute, Dave. Maybe that's why we couldn't hear it.
Yeah. You're muted.
David the lion. You better unmute it.
go. Yeah, I was just saying there's a little bit of music at the beginning of this, so it might be a little
All right.
hard to hear.
Lay it on me.
But there's this covering over our mind to shut out our memory as air beings before we were allowed to come into this world.
Okay, pause that right there.
Air beings. I love
So I'm gonna summarize the first part of that video while you skip ahead. But he talks about how before we entered this world, we were these air spirits, and that the covering over the hogan. So if you've ever seen an Indian hogan, right, on their lodges, there's a blanket over it. He says that blanket represents the covering over our mind that prevents us from remembering when we were spirits. So again,
a
this
veil.
This hidden, it's a veil. This hidden gnosis is about the veil over our minds that prevents us from remembering us being pre-existent spirits, right? So there's that. That's what he describes. He goes on to describe the symbolism of it. And this is the same veil that's in their lodges. So he's talking about their lodges now. So if you can skip ahead, it was like about 7 minutes in.
6:52.
Okay, there's going to be a little fluff there before we get to the good stuff, but stay tuned.
Is based on the sacred number 4, so we understand that we are to prepare to live in the next world, which is the fourth world. And I think a lot of our old people even have forgotten that the traditional teaching is that this is the third world. Everything we do is in preparation for existence in the fourth world. After the fourth world, there are other things that we have to learn and experience. And so it is that everything in this life is based on a sacred number 4. And the teaching about the covering, I wish that people would understand that that is important to know, that kinne begast badaden bad is what they call it. And the teaching is very important to understand that there is a reason why the ceremonial hogan has that blanket over the entryway. Daden bad which is that our minds are covered, so we can't see the holy people. But one day, when we expire from this life, we will encounter that covering, and we have to give our name and to tell who we are when they ask us, Heisende. And so the ceremonial name that you give or are given is something that you don't share with other people, only in a ceremonial setting.
Stop.
And it is that your wife may know your ceremonial name, and it is that it's important to have that ceremonial name and never be able to divulge that to anybody. I received a ceremonial name, and it's always the first part of it I can share with you. It's hashke, and then they have the second part of it is what's important. But hashke would probably means somebody that would scold somebody, and it would be something that that you are as a person, that you have to be a person that has gained enough knowledge to be able to direct people and to scold them when necessary. And so the teachings about the covering on the door is very important to know. And those are the things that we are told.
That is so cool. I want to share, before you give commentary on that, I want to share this. This is a little breakdown of these Eleusinian mysteries, because again, I think the whole entire point here, and Chad, I've heard you make this so many times, and I've actually online on some of your Instagram forums, I've seen you have this masterful way of debasing people and taking them down on arguments. It's so funny. Like, your perspective is so unique, dude. I love it. And particularly what I'm talking about is like, oh, Joseph Smith stole this from the Masons. BS. The Masons stole this from the Rosicrucians. The Masons stole this from the Knights Templars. The Knights Templars stole this from Solomon. Solomon took this from the Eleusinian mysteries. And can you see my screen here? Does it pop up?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to read this because you'll see so many things that pop out to us, right? The Eleusinian mysteries are a set of secret religion rites, and held annually at in Greece, particularly in the city of Eleusis near Athens. These rites were dedicated to Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, and her daughter Persephone. The mysteries were among the most important religious ceremonies in ancient Greece and were associated with the myth of Persephone's, abduction by Hades and her eventual return, which symbolized the cycle of life. Now, check this out. The key aspects, and by the way, this was being done in Greece, and over in Iraq and in Iran, you had two different versions of these as well. Babylon mystery schools and the Babylon mystery endowments were one of these that were being done in Iraq. So they covered an initiation process. The mysteries were open to all Greek-speaking people who were free of blood guilt and not considered impious. Participants known as initiates had to undergo a series of purifications, sacrifices, and fasting before being initiated into the inner circle. The mysteries, the initiation, was considered a deeply personal and transformative experience. Two main phases. The lesser mysteries, held in early spring, mainly for preparation and purification, and the greater mysteries, held in the fall, involved a more extensive series of ceremonies, rituals, dramatic reenactments. Again, these reenactments were of our pre-fathers, our first fathers, and of Demeter. The greater mysteries culminated in the final secret initiation that took place at Telestrion, a large hall in Eleusis. Symbolisms and ritual. The mysteries involved around these themes of death and the premise of renewal of the afterlife. Rituals included the use of sacred objects, dramatic performances, and the ingestion of a potion called kykeon. The precise nature of the rituals and secrets of the mysteries were closely guarded, and the initiates were sworn to secrecy. Sacred, not secret. Secret, not sacred, right? The whole thing here. Mystical experiences. Initiates were believed to gain deeper insight into the divine and to receive promises of blessed afterlife. Is that not what we are experiencing? The experience was said to provide a sense of spiritual rebirth and personal revelation. So these these things have been around forever. These, this endowment of power that we have in our church is a restoration of these things. And I agree with you, Chad, in the fact that this isn't the full thing. This is what we've had. In fact, we've been seeing a watering down, and I don't say that in a negative way, but we've been seeing a watering down of the original endowment. And, Brigham was taught the endowment from Joseph and promised him that he would bring it forth. They intended to bring this in Nauvoo, but they never finished Nauvoo. And, we've got a version of it. It's not the full thing. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's not something like a sacrament prayer that has to be exactly perfect. The whole entire purpose of this thing is to awaken us of our divine heritage, awaken us to the fact that we are God's children, that we existed prior to this, that we've come down and taken on these fallen bodies, and that we have an opportunity to, in this life, receive this endowment of power and prepare us to come back to God.
Yeah. I mean,
should I say, Trevor, what we recently read in the Menha, a little quote about the temple? Do you recall?
I don't remember, but if you feel like it, say it, bro.
Yeah, I work at the temple, and I was shocked to see this in a passage out of I think it's 2 Samuel, where it says that in the last days, when we're doing temple work, we're doing it for the dead, and it actually says that it's a good thing, and that basically it's an encouragement for the people that were hearing this word. But then what they later said is that the temple, or doing the work for the dead, would get shortened. Like the Menha record actually prophesies of the changes in the temple and how they're shortened, so that way it feels like it's more about a celebration of getting the work done than it is to ponder over the works that are in basically the temple endowment. So yeah, I thought that was a really phenomenal prophecy that only weeks ago was fulfilled.
Interesting. And one thing that we're going to start doing here at Zion Media is anytime that we talk about the Menha records, we're going to give a quick little 30-second hit. This is a record that is happening contemporaneously, the same time as the Book of Mormon. These are people that broke off at the time of Alma 54, went northward with Hagoth, and had their whole entire life, and documented this and wrote records of them. At the peacemaker, Jesus, visited them a couple of times. The word peacemaker, which is what they called Jesus, is mentioned over 1,800 times in this document. And this document can be found at the Church History Library and online in the Church History Catalog. The church knows of it. They've marked it as apocryphal, and it testifies of the Book of Mormon. It is, if this is true, the Book of Mormon is true. And a lot of people are always out there looking for, like, is the Book of Mormon true? Can we prove it? If there is another record, and if this record is true, it proves the Book of Mormon is true. You can find it in our drive. Click on us for additional records. Our drive is going to be named Kamora, and we're putting records in there. So I just want to make
Zion's
sure.
Kamora.
Anytime we bring this up on Zion Media about the Menha records, we're going to talk about it so that people can know what it is and go and see if you like it. Okay. Back on track.
Back to the endowment of power, right? So we go through. So we know that there was this liturgy. So Margaret Barker talks about the 3 rooms of the temple representing the Garden of Eden and the fall, right? We know there was this liturgy about being clothed in garments of glory and becoming divine beings. So when they entered the temple as divine beings, they saw themselves becoming angels, right? And that's what you should do in the temple. You should see yourself literally entering into the presence of God. When you speak to the temple worker, when you're at the veil, imagine you truly are at the veil and about to enter into God's presence. Because here's the thing. It is giving us directions on, how to seek further light, if you will. The brother of Jared is one of the clearest examples. It is very clearly an endowment, right? The way he journeys up the mountain, and then he goes and he's speaking to the Lord through this veil, which appears as a cloud, right? And we go back to that white stone from Revelations, which, to he that overcomes, I'll give him a white stone with a new name written on it, right? Joseph Smith says that's a Urim and Thummim, and it's representative of the endowment of power, right? Revelations also speaks of, to he who overcomes, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I've also overcome and sat with my Father on his throne. Jesus Christ, when praying to his Father, said, let them, what was it? That they may be glorified and be one with us, and that I will give them the glory which you have given me, that they may be one even as I am one with you, Father, right? So it's becoming that divine status, sitting on the throne with Jesus. And so the white stone is very important. We know so I forget the exact church father who said this. I'm going to pull up the quote real quick. So there is a reference to one of these esoteric rituals that was quoted by a church father. It's called the white stone, right? So even in sort of more Orthodox Christianity, these sort of rituals survive a little bit. So Hippolytus of Rome referred in veiled terms to such a rite, which he called the white stone. According to Joseph Smith, the white stone in Revelations is symbolic of the Urim and Thummim, which means light and knowledge, and is the white stone with a new name on it, right? And he says, but if there is any other matter which ought to be told, let the bishop impart it secretly to those who are communicated. He shall not tell this to any but the faithful, and only after they have been first been communicated. This is the white stone of which John said there is a new name written upon it, which no man knows except him who receives, right? So we have, even in early, more Orthodox Christianity, they're talking about these same rites that the Gnostics claimed they preserved, right? And he's saying that if somebody wishes to be initiated into this order, they have to talk to their bishop, and their bishop will approve them as to whether or not they can get this new name with the white stone. Funny enough.
Oh, this is so perfect.
Right?
You mentioned a few times, and I just want to make sure that listeners that are hearing this can assimilate this. You've mentioned Margaret Barker talking about, and other people talking about, an actual liturgy.
Yes.
This liturgy, as far as I understand it, is an order of practicing a ritual, right? And so, like, the Catholic Church has a very specific liturgy for their communion. If you go to their church, they do things. You do this, then you do this, then you do this. In the temple, there it's complete liturgy, right? And this endowment, this process is that something that might be liturgical, if that's even a word, is our sacrament meeting, right? The blessing, doing it the exact same way. The deacons and teachers and priests standing in the same place and following that order exactly. And we all are crossing our fingers every time, hoping that they screw up the sacrament prayer so that they got to read it 3 or 4 times.
I would say a liturgy, more specifically the way I'm using it, is like a ceremony that's done as a play, right? As they're acting it out. That is what I would say a liturgy is. You are acting out something very specific in a ceremonial setting. And you do see aspects of the temple liturgy I'm not going to speak about in certain Catholic masses. There is I think it's like the sign of peace that they give each other, which, if you look that up, that's very similar. You also see...
I love that part in the Catholic... is it their communion or...
Yeah, it's a certain communion, I think. There's also something very similar that someone showed me before I went to the temple, from a once a year Orthodox liturgy where they have to knock on a door to enter in, which again, that's told about. It's very symbolic. Ask and ye shall receive. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Jesus Christ tells us to do this. Teaching of Sylvanus, it's teaching us to return to our divine nature. It's speaking of knocking on the door, which is Christ, to enter into the presence of the tree of life. So I think that's liturgical, but I also think it's symbolic. Knocking and you will receive. There is an interesting experience I had that I'm not really sure I fully understand, that I can go more in depth on, where I sort of follow those instructions. But after I'm done explaining this, so the endowment is instructing us. We are first go through the initiatories. We receive the garments. We are anointed with oil, and the endowment. It's not all symbolic. We are being given an endowment of power so that we can seek further light. We are taught certain things. We are told how to identify angels and demons, because if we are seeking further light, what is eventually going to happen? You are going to encounter an angel. Now, I have a friend who, I talked about this on a podcast I did about demonic possession. He, after he was first endowed, was sort of questioning it because, the Freemasons are, like questioning that stuff. And in his bedroom, a glowing being appeared of light and told him that the church was doing evil things inside of the temple, right? And what does he do? He does the test, right? And the angel fails the test. And then he raises his hand to the square and casts it out, and it turns into a shadow being, and then it fades away. Right?
Interesting. I wanted to bring something up that I've heard about that test, and it's this Joseph Smith taught this, so this isn't something coming from the temple, but talking about being able to test angels of light, messengers, angels, visitations, and he mentions that when you go and you go to shake their hand, that there will be nothing there, right? If you're testing them and you go and shake their hand, there will be nothing there. And I originally thought of that, and I'm like, well, maybe that's because they don't know how to do it. But then obviously, if somebody can read the internet, they can go and find it, right? That's the case. And then I read somewhere else saying that the reason why there'll be nothing there is because they don't have a physical body.
Yes.
So even if they went to give you the sign, you wouldn't feel it. There's literally nothing there.
So it's also very interesting because my friend, he described it, I don't have the exact terms. It wasn't exactly like feeling nothing, but it definitely wasn't like feeling a hand. He did not feel a hand. He felt like, he said it was like snake skin, something slimy and cold, but not quite there.
So this is one of your buddies that actually had a visitor, and he
Yes. Yeah, and this guy, he's 100% legit. He told me this in private. He's not like saying this for attention. And I asked him to come on the podcast I did about like demonic encounters, and he said they didn't feel comfortable sharing that, but that I could mention it. I could bring it up, right? And he told me this as I was preparing for the temple, right? So, and then again, I just remember this. So he mentioned...
So lizard people are actually not physical bodies, but they are real.
Well, here's what else he said. He said that he told this. So he told this story to his dad, and his dad said he had something very similar happen to him on his mission, and that he had to do it, and that it was the same effect. The same thing happened. It felt the same way. So it's not going to feel like a flesh, but you might feel something, just not like you won't feel a person. It's weird. I don't know how to describe.
Because obviously we know based off of Genesis 6 that the sons of man, the fallen angels, the watchers, they had physical bodies, right? They were able to impregnate the daughters of Adam and Eve, right? So there's something going on there where you should be able to feel something.
You want to know something interesting about that? So we go back to the book of Enoch, right? It's a temple endowment text. It talks about the sons of God. But what happens in Joseph Smith's Enoch? Is it literal angels that comes down? No. It is the covenant people becoming apostate. It is the angels in the temple priests, the Melchizedek priesthood holders. And then when we get into, the fallen angels, they taught God's secrets and mysteries, and that's what they used to make magic. And we're talking about the Babylon mystery stuff. Well, where does that come from? These apostate Melchizedek priests.
You're saying that the Melchizedek priesthood in some way also makes us angels.
Yes.
Yeah. That's pretty epic. So we're not just angels in the temple, but we're here on this podcast with the Melchizedek priesthood,
Well, I mean, what is it what transforms you into an angel that I've said? putting on the garments of glory. What are you wearing right now?
Yeah.
So even though you're in your fallen state, beneath your earthly clothing, you still have on the garments of glory, right? So it's a remnant of your previous divine status, because there's two falls. I believe there was a literal fall into this world of Adam and Eve, that they fell from their status. I don't know exactly how it happened, because a lot of Genesis is that temple liturgy. That's what scholars agree. Temple Genesis and a lot of the Psalms were temple liturgy. But here's the thing. We also fall. We were divine beings, and we are born into this world, and we fell into this world from our previous divine status, and now we have to return to the presence of God.
Mm.
Think about that.
So there is some that would say that the Garden of Eden was actually accessible, or still is accessible, through a portal that, somehow connects to the center of the earth, or they basically would come from that portal, and in a sense they are falling from that heightened state, and that portal could be anywhere, but it was accessible through earth.
I mean, well, what I think, so this goes back more into Gnostic stuff. The Gnostics? They were very adamant, a lot of them, not all of them, and they believe this in varying degrees, that the God of this world was the devil, and they equated that with the God of the Old Testament. Right? A lot of these Gnostic Gospels aren't original, but they are based on these hidden teachings of Jesus Christ, these esoteric things. And I think they're misinterpreting that. The God of this world, what is this world? We are in the telestial kingdom. Is Satan? We are in hell. Satan is the God of this realm. He has dominion over this kingdom. Adam and Eve didn't just fall. The whole earth fell. It fell from its state of grace. It was in a terrestrial state, and it fell into a telestial state, right?
And interestingly enough, this is where Masons get a bad rap, because people have taken that doctrine and twisted it and been like, Masons believe that Satan is God, right? And it's like, actually, if you read what we believe Satan is a god of this earth.
Yes, he has dominion over this world. There's a funny story. Earlier this summer, this could be a coincidence. It's a funny story. I did say something very insulting to Satan out loud in a very challenging sort of way.
Yeah.
It was exciting what happened, but a massive storm goes through. I was in Grove City in Ohio. Massive storm comes through out of nowhere, just instantly shows up, like tornado type weather. I can literally send you a picture if you want to upload it on the screen. There were trees torn out of the ground. I was being blown away. I was soaking wet. And I got to a Dairy Queen and hid inside there, right? Because I go door to door doing solar for work. That could have been a coincidence, but it made me think. Maybe it was Satan, or maybe it was God saying, "Oh, you think you can handle Satan? Well, can you handle this?" Right? I thought it was pretty exciting, though.
You're probably too young for this, but do you remember Dana Carvey on Saturday Night Live doing the church lady? Do you know who that is?
No.
He's got this shtick where and Dave, you should insert a clip of this, but he dresses up as this old lady that in this Catholic church, curly hair, and every single time something bad happens, he always goes, "Could it be Satan?"
Okay, I know what you're talking about. But back to the endowment, right? Because we're going to have to finish up soon enough. But
yeah, let's wrap this up.
So what is the pattern we see through this liturgy is that we were once divine beings. We fell. We're fallen, right? The endowment, it's not about Adam and Eve. That is a placeholder for us, right? That is why in some of these texts you have Enoch meeting Raphael. I'm pretty sure Enoch is Raphael, but even if he's not, he met the other archangels too, so he met himself. We have in some of these endowment texts Adam meeting Michael. Adam is Michael. That doesn't make any sense unless Adam is us, right? So in teachings of Sylvanus, for example, it's all about awakening to your divine nature, being covered by the atonement, and returning to your parents. So we see that same pattern, that the garments of glory are equated with in teachings of Sylvanus. It is very directly equated to returning to a previous divine nature and being redeemed from this world and redeemed from the fall. And we know this was done in some sort of liturgy. We know the liturgy of the temple had something to do with Adam and Eve in the fall. And it was an ascent through 3 rooms into the presence of God. And we also know that the various things in the temple, like the Ark of the Covenant, like the menorah, the tree of life, were meant to trigger these temple visions. And we also know that it is leading you, it is trying to teach you something. Now, here's what I believe. The reason why the church has put so much emphasis not only on the garments, because there is significant evidence that I would say that garments actually provide like spiritual protection from demons. And that's coming from the podcast I did about demonic possessions, where I had people come on and share their mission stories about that stuff. Literally look up Latter-day Chad, Latter Wave, Mormon exorcism stories if you want to see that. So there is something important about that, but there is also the fact that it is teaching us to receive revelation, right? To seek further light. And if we are seeking further light, what's going to happen? Okay, if you're sanctifying yourself by keeping your covenants, right? It's not just, oh, here are some rules for you to follow, and since you're a good boy, I'm going to give you a reward and you're going to go to heaven. No, we are being taught how to sanctify ourselves to enter into the presence of God. Now, sometimes this comes off as a final judgment scene. The Egyptians, Quick Media has done videos on the Egyptian endowment, they had the same signs and tokens, and this was on the Book of Abraham's scroll, right? They have many of the signs from the temple, and they are approaching the veil and doing all these signs and stuff. And we also know from the Book of Abraham, they tried to copy the priesthood. So,
which makes sense if it's a funeral text, right? If it's a funeral text.
So it's about that final judgment beyond the veil, but it's not just a final judgment. Joseph Smith explicitly taught that anybody who has sufficient faith can have visions, be visited by angels, and even see the Lord himself, right? Joseph Smith taught this doctrine. It's on the official LDS website, for crying out loud. It's not something
you're saying somebody that doesn't have the keys, who's not a member of the only true church in the history of the universe, Jesus can visit them?
Yeah, I mean, Joseph Smith didn't have the priesthood keys when he was first visited. Lehi and John the Baptist did not have apostolic keys. John the Baptist had the Aaronic priesthood, right? I have no doubt he was visited by angels. In fact, it's the Aaronic priesthood that holds the keys to the ministering of angels, right? The Aaronic priesthood has the keys to the ministering of angels. So if there are specific angel keys, a 12-year-old deacon has those keys. Joseph Smith didn't have any priesthood when he was first visited. Anyone with sufficient faith can be visited. Now, if we go back to the brother of Jared, what is happening? So the brother of Jared, he asks God for help. So it goes back to the white stone thing representing the endowment, right? So he takes these stones, which are often depicted as white, and he asks God to provide light for him. And how does God respond? He reaches his hand through the veil and touches each stone. So he only sees the hand of God through the veil, touching the stones. And then he's shocked, because through his faith, he has seen the true nature of God. And the true nature of God is the same as man. Now, we get a lot of flack for saying that God was once like us. It's not saying that God is simply a creation or a creature. In fact, our scriptures are the only ones who say intelligence is co-eternal with God. The base level of our spirits is co-eternal with God and is just as old as him. But it is saying that we are the same type of being as God, right? So that is what the brother of Jared sees. He sees the hand of the Lord through the veil reaching out to him, because God is always reaching out to us. And then, because of his faith,
I like that,
the veil is lifted from his eyes, and he sees the face of Jesus Christ. Throughout the Psalms, when it's going over that temple liturgy, there are so many scriptures about seeing the face of the Lord. Oh Lord, I will seek your face, yada, yada, right? It's in the document that we'll put in the description that I put together. It's in the Psalms. Doctrine and Covenants says that everyone who puts off his sins and sanctifies himself will see my face and know that I am. And in another place it's written that the Lord, if you properly sanctify yourself in his own time and in his own way, he will unveil himself to you. Now, I'm not saying every single person is going to see Jesus Christ in this lifetime. But I'm saying Ether, right after the brother of Jared sees the Lord, talks about how the veil, the same veil the Navajo says keeps us from remembering, that veil is a veil of unbelief, right? If we had enough faith, we would overcome the veil. There is no doubt most of us will have angels and demons around us from time to time. There's probably, between the three of us, I'm sure there's like an angel in the room somewhere, right? No doubt. But if you sanctify yourself and follow in the temple, if you keep the covenants and follow in that direction, God is providing you the protection, that covering to resist evil spirits. Because like I've said to many people, I've had good conversations with people about psychedelics and stuff. I do believe the visions they see are real. I also believe that if you are forcing the veil open through drugs, it leaves you more vulnerable. However, if you are naturally overcoming the veil through your faith and through sanctifying yourself, so those are the two factors. So there is belief, which is you must believe that it is possible for you to receive revelation from God. How does Nephi start out the Book of Mormon? Because it's an esoteric temple text. First thing he says, I, Nephi, having goodly parents, knowing the mysteries of God. Well, we're talking about those Babylonian mysteries. We're talking about the Israelite mysteries. It is these mystical temple ordinances that he's talking about. Later, because he knows the mysteries, he seeks revelation for himself. He has been through the temple. And when his father has a vision, he knows to seek for himself. And then he receives a vision, and an angel appears to him in the vision and answers what he asked. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Nephi knocked, and he received. Right? Okay, so, and that pattern is very clearly throughout the Book of Mormon. It puts such a heavy emphasis over and over again about how any person who seeks revelation can receive it. Right? When we're talking about the condemnation of the church, a lot of people like to blame polygamy or something. I don't care. I think polygamy is a golden calf, and I think both sides of the argument are really stupid. I don't care about polygamy. I don't care if Joseph Smith had one wife or a million. It doesn't change what's important, which is that I am a divine spirit in a body, and I need to remember who I am. I need to awaken to my divine status, and that the temple is guiding me through that, right? And the Book of Mormon puts such a heavy emphasis on those prepared from the foundation of the world. It very directly correlates the priests in the temple to angels, right? Multiple times, if you look closely, if you read Dave Butler's book, In the Language of Adam, it covers so much of this stuff. If we're under condemnation, like the Book of Mormon says, it is because of our lack of faith, right? I'm going to tell a little story. So, oftentimes in the online sphere of debating stuff, I clearly believe that the modern church is true. I have seen proof that we do have apostles on the church. I've also seen many of the flaws that people will leave for remnant type groups in the church. And I think those criticisms are valid. And I might join a group like Denver Snuffers if I had not received the revelation I have received, if I did not have friends who personally know apostles and can testify of them. And now I'm not testifying of every single apostle, but Jeffrey R. Holland is legit. Look at one of his most recent Instagram posts. He talks about how Mormon, and if you read this passage in Mormon, what happens is because of the people's lack of belief, God shuts the mouths of the prophets and takes the apostles from them. Because of their wickedness, because of their unbelief, the prophets are not allowed to prophesy, right? Jeffrey R. Holland talks about that. And then he directly compares it to the brother of Jared, who obtained that second comforter witness of Jesus Christ, who saw the hand of the Lord through the veil and had the veil taken from his eyes and was redeemed from the fall, as it was said, right? It also talks about the brother of Jared literally moving mountains with it. And if you pay attention to Native American stories, they literally have a story about one of their ancestors that moved a mountain and they know where the mountain is. So crazy stuff. But that faith is so important. We try so hard to fit in with the creedal Christianity to be accepted by evangelicals. I received a revelation 2 revelations. So I'm not going to say what this was, but one of the things I was told had to do with Shane and Trevor. And I asked them, did this thing happen to you? Do you remember that, Trevor? Where I was like, hey, I was told, and you're like, yep, that happened. The other thing I was told, now it was very weird wording as I was dozing off to sleep, similar to how Shane was told that I should speak about the temple. And I'm sure I'll do more episodes on the temple on here. I was told they essentially, I forget the exact words. It used 2 words that stood out to me, dumb and dandy, which was really weird. I don't talk like that. But I found out why.
Dandy?
Dandy, like from the 1960s or something.
That's dandy.
But it basically said they are trying so hard to get people to accept the scripture that they have, that they don't realize, so dumb and dandy, it says after that they don't realize they have something completely different. And then I'm at a ward I'm not usually in for sacrament meeting. And this girl was giving a talk, very clear, a nice girl, right? Clearly a faithful member of the church. And she just went through the temple, and she's talking about how it, and she's bearing her testimony, but she's also saying, oh, I don't really understand it, and it kind of freaked me out, but I'll trust in Jesus, basically. And I don't remember how she used it, but she used those words, dumb and dandy. Because we have tried, and it was 2 days after this, because we have tried so hard to fit into this creedal Christian mold. We are Gentiles rejecting the fullness of the gospel. The Book of Mormon is a deeply esoteric text, and like it says, if angels and visions and miracles cease among you, it is because of your own lack of faith. People like so much to blame the leadership for the lack of prophecy, but because we are trying so hard to be accepted by those Christians who hated us and tarred and feathered us and burned our stuff down, just as they had done to each other for 2,000 years, burning each other at the stake over heresies, you'll know them by their fruits. Because we're trying so hard for them to tell us that we are Christians, because we're trying so hard to fit in with watered down evangelical milquetoast Christianity when we're basically semi-Gnostic. We have all this cool hidden stuff that Jesus Christ taught that scholars agree, you know what? Yeah, Jesus Christ was teaching some weird Babylon mystery stuff too. More so, he was restoring the true order of it, not the corrupted version. But nonetheless, because we try so hard, we are rejecting the fullness of the gospel, right? If angels and miracles cease, it's not because Russell M. Nelson said so he's a bad dude or whatever. I'm sure Russell M. Nelson's a great dude. I don't know him. It is up to us to make a change. The temple is so important. And what do you see when people go to the temple on Instagram? You see these Utah girls with their fake tans and their lattes going and taking their selfies in front of the temple. Oh, it's so cute. And it's this deeply esoteric ritual where we are angels who came down into these bodies, into this fallen state, and that we must be redeemed from the fall and enter back into the presence of our Father, whether in this life or the next.
You remind me of Mormon Housewives reality TV.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's...
Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah. One thing to put a pin in this, and I want you to cover something that you did in the comments a few times, right? And we'll use this to kind of wrap it up and close out. But somebody mentioned something based on something you said in the video, real time, and they said, so do you believe the church is under condemnation? And your approach and perspective on this was so refreshing to me. I absolutely loved it. You flipped it on the members. So
it is on the members.
Give us that tip.
I know of people, not directly. I have friends who know apostles. I've heard stories about crazy stuff. They know bishops who have resurrected people from the dead that have been talked about in general conference, and they know the girl that has been resurrected from the dead personally by the Melchizedek priesthood, right? It is our fault, and we are so prideful. We refuse to accept that. Now, how did I prepare for the temple? To answer Shane's question, I researched the ancient temple rites, and I fasted for 3 days straight and prepared myself to literally enter the presence of God and receive revelation, right? Because if we knock, it will be answered. If we have enough faith. Now, I have a little story that I wasn't sure I should share, right? After this happened to me, I told myself, I don't know if I should share this, and I'm not going to share all the details. Nothing really happened. but I think I saw a glimpse of what could happen. I was alone in my apartment, and I was reading Teachings of Sylvanus, and that phrase stood out so much to me about knocking on the door to enter. So I stood up, I'm alone in the apartment, and I loudly say, I would like to enter the presence of the Lord. And I knock on the door 3 times. And as soon as I forget, before I said, I'm like, and I accept the consequences of what I'll see. Because if you receive more light, you will receive more damnation for going against it. God doesn't reveal himself because then he would have to judge you, right? That's why it's so hard to go to outer darkness. So I say that, it's like, I accept that. As soon as I say that, my vision becomes clouded like a fog in front of me. And my heart starts racing. Like, I feel adrenaline. I haven't felt euphoria like that since the time I let my jiu-jitsu instructor choke me out so that I could know when to tap and pass out. And as soon as I woke up, I felt this adrenaline rush, and I went out and I ran for 3 hours straight with my ankle weights on. That's the euphoria, like a runner's high I was feeling. It was like for 10 solid seconds. And like, I literally saw it, and I felt like there was a presence in the room with me. And then I sort of stuttered a little bit, and it instantly snapped back. And the only other time I've seen that fog was when I went through the endowment for the first time, and I stared at the plant in the center trying to trigger a vision. I was like, I want to see the tree of life. We have these trees in the Holy of Holies of the temple. That's the tree of life. That's our tree of life. Maybe it's not the full one. Maybe we'll get a real tree of life eventually. I certainly hope so. But I'm trying to do it, and I sort of slowly saw that fog come in as I was trying to trigger a vision, entering into a meditative state. Here it happened instantly. And I feel what happened was one of 2 things. I sort of did a Peter, where Peter is walking on the water, and then his lack of faith causes him to fall into the water. And so I snapped out of it. That's 1. 2, I genuinely don't think that I am worthy to enter the presence of the Lord. So it's not just faith, it is sanctification. But in that moment, I truly knew that through faith, I could enter into the presence of the Lord. And I knocked on that door, and I think that fog I saw was a representation of the veil, that there is this veil around us, and it became visible enough to me through my faith. I wasn't faithful enough to see a physical angel. I'd love for that to happen. That's awesome. That's so cool. That's literally so cool. And that's what I mean when I say I hate the church culture. We have this cool stuff. The Melchizedek priesthood has the keys to the mysteries of God. The Aaronic priesthood has the keys to the ministering of angels, right? So even if the condemnation is like a lot of people do, it's like, oh, the Melchizedek priesthood was taken. I mean, I know if people have been resurrected from the dead, but sure. Even if it's that, we still have the keys to the ministering of angels. And because we are trying so hard to fit into this secular, crappy Christianity and be accepted by the world, that's the same thing. So I've said many times, I believe the Book of Mormon took place all over America. This is an example of what we do. I do lean more towards Heartland, and here's why. It has nothing to do with the geography. Nothing, I mean, sure, the Heartland has some really cool artifacts and stuff, right? I trust Joseph Smith when he says that descendants of Lehi are all over the continent, though. But here's the thing. Heartland evidence will be like, dude, we literally found an artifact that has the 10 Commandments on it, and they persecuted the guy who found it, and he ended up sadly committing suicide, and they carbon dated the box that it was in, and it was 2 Nephite times. And there's a conspiracy to hide all this stuff, and we have all these swords. Mesoamerica evidence will often be like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't swords, maybe it was an obsidian club, and maybe it wasn't horses, maybe it was a giant pig tapir thing. Because they're trying to appeal to the academics who hate us, right? Because the academics, no matter what evidence is found, they won't believe the Book of Mormon is true. The Back Creek Stone,
even if they were holding the dang thing in their hands.
Exactly. The Back Creek Stone is the best example of that. It was found on a controlled Smithsonian dig with lots of witnesses. They had it in a museum for like 3 years or something before they even realized it was Hebrew. And after they realize it's written in Hebrew, they make up the stupidest excuses ever for how it was faked. They will never accept us. The creedal Christians around us who persecuted, I don't have Mormon ancestors. I'm from a convert family, like I said. I don't have any pioneer ancestors.
That's like asking Satan to tell the truth.
Yeah, They hate us. They absolutely hate us. And we are trying so
Please
hard.
just tell everybody what happened. Please, Satan.
Yeah, and that's why I haven't even been on Instagram a year yet. I've already gotten close to 10,000 subscribers just by posting stuff, not subscribers, followers, just by posting what I think is cool and funny memes, because I'm very unapologetic. I don't feel the need to apologize or justify myself to them. I know that the church is true and it has authority. I have seen miraculous things. The only 2 times I've had waking visions, 3 if you count that. So this has to do with the endowment. I forgot to mention this. One thing Shane told me as I was preparing to the endowment is you'll just get a random name if you just go for the heck of it. But if you truly want to be reborn in God and want to progress towards further light, God will arrange for you to get a name that has significant purpose. Now, a week before I was endowed, I was reading all this apocryphal stuff, conspiracy theories on different things, different tabs open. And there was a name that stood out to me. It literally popped out of the screen. I saw it physically in my vision, this name. And in my mind, it's like, that is you. And I literally had a vision of this name and its meaning. And then when I go to the temple, that's the name I receive. And I shudder. And I have like a heart attack. Because I did ask God. And that name does have very significant meaning towards me. It is a name that has lingered my entire life now that I look back. And it does have to do with the type of person I am meant to be, right? And I literally had a vision of it. The only other time I've had an experience like that was when I was reading the Bible and I saw a prophecy that is only found in the Book of Mormon, and then later saw it in the Book of Mormon. I share these things not to put myself up as a light, as some people said in the comments on the other, but to show this stuff is real and you can experience it, and we need to. I want the sealed portion of the plates. I don't want to be under condemnation, but it is up to us to progress spiritually and follow those directions. I'm sure the church has more records of all sorts. Maybe it's the Nemenha. Maybe they have plates. Sean Littlebear, the official records keeper of the Cheyenne Nation, has said that the Cheyenne Nation has metal plates with Hebrew, Reformed Egyptian, and other languages on. There is more stuff. But because of our stubbornness, because of our hard-heartedness, because we are the drunkards of Ephraim of Isaiah 28, we do not receive those things. We are the Gentiles who reject the fullness of the gospel.
Wow.
And we need to take the temple and what we have been given seriously if we are to gain more.
That was the mic drop. That was the literal mic drop. Okay, so we're pushing up on an hour and 35 minutes. We need to put a pin in it.
Oh, we're at an hour and 43.
Well, it started late. Remember
Almost.
the technical difficulty?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It started a little bit late because it technically did, but this is the perfect spot to put a pin in it. Many of you guys have said we need to get Latter-day Chad on more. We've been talking to him about having him come on maybe weekly, grace us with some info and some drops. So we're gonna save the rest of this to later. I wanna blop up on the screen one of my favorite scriptures in the Book of Mormon. It's right out of 2nd Nephi. So important, and the very last 5 words are so key. Behold, the way for man is narrow, but it lieth in a straight course before him. And the keeper of the gate is the Holy One of Israel, and he employeth no servant there, and there is no other way. The keeper of the gate is Jesus Christ. He employs no servant there. You come to Christ through that gate. We are taught in the church in primary all the way up until receiving our endowments that there is a path. There is this covenant path. And the end of that path is Christ. And I want to encourage all of our viewers, all of you guys out there, have you sought the face of the Lord? If not, that should be something that is high on your list, getting things right in your personal life so that you feel justified, so that you feel sanctified, that you can indeed go on that journey and seek the face of the Lord and commune with him. And it is promised, like Chad said, it doesn't matter who you are. You don't have to be anyone great. He is reaching his hand out and extending to all of us. It just takes upon us going on that path, getting to that gate. and seeking his face.
So would you say, like Isaiah said, shake the hand that you may enter the gate of the nobles?
That's absolutely. Okay. So for the Key of David podcast, for myself, David Douglas, Shane, who's MIA today on Labor Day, and for Latter-day Chad, we want to thank you guys for joining, for coming here to Zion Media to get some content. We aim to bring fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, different guys like Latter-day Chad that can help articulate our view and individual views of the gospel that maybe resonate a little more with you. And I know this guy is bringing it, and he's on a pretty good wavelength. So make sure that you guys can share this. Make sure that you like it. Make sure that you subscribe. We noticed that only about 35% of our viewers are subscribed, and we're peaking up around 7,000. So if just you other 65% of you guys would go on there and click subscribe, it would help the momentum. It would help other people find these things. And so for the Key of David podcast, all of us here at Zion Media, hope you guys have a great day, and we will see you soon.
I hope I walk the path to Zion, where truth and light can guide me through. I seek the face of my Redeemer to find my purpose clear and know just what to do. Through every trial, through every shadow, I'll seek the light that breaks the night. I want to know the deeper meaning. I want to see His guiding light. I'm seeking Zion, I'm seeking truth. I'm searching for the way to find my place with you. I want the promise, I want the call, to know my purpose here, to give to you my all. I hope I walk the path to Zion, where truth and light can guide me through. I seek the face of my Redeemer, to find my purpose clear and know just what to do. Just what to do. Through every trial, through every shadow, I'll seek the light that breaks the night. I want to know the deeper meaning. I want to see His guiding light. I'm seeking Zion, I'm seeking truth. I'm searching for the way to find my place with you. I want the promise, I want the call, to know my purpose here, to give to you my all. I hope to hear the words unspoken, the small voice that stirs my soul. I long to see the heavens open, to know my purpose here, to give to you my all. To you my all, to you my all, to you my all. I hope to hear the words unspoken, it's the small voice that stirs my soul. I long to see the heavens open, to know my purpose here, to give to you my all. I'll climb the mountains, I'll cross the sea, whatever it takes to bring me to my knees. With every step, I'll draw more near, until your love is all I feel, all I hear. I'm seeking Zion, I'm seeking truth. I'm searching for the way to find my place with you. I want the promise, I want the call, to know my purpose here, to give to you my all. I'll go back to Zion, across the sea of faith someday, to walk beside you in your kingdom, to know your love will guide my way.